I never thought I would see the day when the person I trusted the most could betray me so completely. At first, everything seemed normal. He was loving, attentive, and charming. But slowly, small inconsistencies started to appear. He would disappear for hours without explanation. His phone would always be on silent. And sometimes, I noticed the faintest hesitation in his voice when he spoke to me. I told myself I was overthinking, that maybe I was imagining things, because the idea that someone I loved so deeply could lie to me was unbearable. But my gut told me otherwise. One evening, I waited for him to come home, noticing that he didn't reply to messages as he usually did. When he finally arrived, he acted casual, smiling as though nothing had happened. But inside, I felt a deep unease, a sense that I was on the edge of discovering something I wasn't ready for. I replayed every memory, every conversation, and tried to find patterns in the small cracks I was beginning to see. The more I observed, the more I realized that the truth had been hidden from me all along, wrapped in the comforting lies of someone I had trusted with my heart. That evening, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would not ignore the signs any longer. I needed to know the truth, even if it shattered everything I believed in. The uncertainty haunted me, but it also ignited something else, an unwavering determination to uncover what he was hiding, no matter how painful it might be. The fear and suspense were overwhelming, yet I knew that facing the reality of betrayal was the only way forward. Once I began paying closer attention, the web of lies he had spun became impossible to ignore. The deceit wasn't clumsy, it was deliberate, carefully constructed to keep me blind and unsuspecting. I found hidden messages that contradicted his stories, receipts for dinners and gifts I had never received, and social media interactions that he thought I would never discover. Each new revelation hurt like a knife, but it also clarified something I had been trying to deny. The man I loved had been living a double life. It wasn't just about dishonesty, it was about manipulation, control, and a blatant disregard for my feelings. I felt anger and disbelief surge through me, emotions so strong they left me physically shaken. I realized that this betrayal was layered. Not a single mistake, but a calculated pattern of lies and deceit over months, maybe even years. The more I uncovered, the more I understood that I couldn't confront him without preparation. Confronting him blindly would have been pointless. He was clever enough to twist words and evade responsibility. I started documenting everything, gathering proof that would expose the truth beyond any doubt. Each new piece of evidence made me more determined. My heart ached, but a sense of empowerment began to replace the helplessness I had felt for so long. I was no longer just a victim, I was someone who was ready to reclaim control. Someone who would not let betrayal define my life. Slowly, the fear and confusion were replaced by a fierce clarity. The truth needed to be revealed, and I would make sure it was undeniable. The moment I could no longer ignore came when I stumbled upon a message that left me completely speechless. It wasn't a fleeting indiscretion, it was a meticulously hidden affair, months in the making. I remember sitting there, frozen, my hands trembling as I scrolled through the evidence, feeling both devastated and strangely empowered. It was as if the fog of uncertainty lifted, leaving only the harsh, undeniable truth. The man I had trusted with my heart had chosen lies over honesty, deception over love. Anger and sorrow collided inside me, a chaotic mix that made it hard to breathe. I knew then that my next step had to be strategic. Confronting him without preparation would only give him room to manipulate the narrative, to twist the facts as he had always done. I spent hours thinking, planning, and mentally rehearsing the confrontation. Every detail mattered: what I would say, how I would present the evidence, and how I would maintain my composure. This was no longer just about betrayal. It was about justice, about reclaiming my voice and dignity. The realization struck me hard. I had been blind, but now I could see clearly. I would not let fear or love keep me silent. The truth had to come out, not just for me, but for anyone who might ever underestimate my strength or question my courage. I became methodical in my approach, almost like a detective in my own life. Every hidden message, every secret email, every meeting he tried to conceal was meticulously documented. Screenshots, recordings, and careful notes became my arsenal against his deception. This process was emotionally exhausting. Each discovery opened fresh wounds, but it also strengthened my resolve. I realized just how calculated his lies had been, every detail designed to keep me unaware. Yet, with every piece of proof I collected, I felt my confidence grow. I was no longer powerless. I was armed with the undeniable truth. I began to see patterns, strategies, and the ways he had manipulated not just me, but the world around him. Friends, colleagues, even family members had been unknowingly pulled into his web of deception. The more I documented, the clearer the story became, and the more I understood the depth of the betrayal. It was painful, but necessary. I couldn't rush. Every piece of evidence mattered. Every screenshot, every voice recording, every hidden detail became a tool for exposing the reality of his actions. The process taught me patience, resilience, and the power of meticulous planning. I realized that revenge wasn't about cruelty, it was about truth. About shining a light on the darkness he had hidden behind his charming facade. The day I confronted him felt surreal, almost cinematic, as if my life had become a story I was narrating to the world. I laid out everything before him: the messages, the emails, the hidden receipts, every lie meticulously documented. He froze, trying to process what I had uncovered. At first, he attempted denial, the usual deflections and manipulations I had grown accustomed to, but I didn't waver. I spoke calmly, deliberately, letting the evidence speak louder than any words he could muster. Watching the mask slip from his face, the shock and guilt etched in his expression, was both painful and strangely satisfying. It wasn't about humiliating him, it was about reclaiming my power and asserting the truth. For months, I had been trapped in a fog of confusion and hurt, but now the clarity was overwhelming. His carefully crafted web of deceit had been unraveled, and I was finally free to face reality. Friends and family who had noticed changes in him were shocked when they saw the evidence. Their disbelief turned to validation, and for the first time in months, I felt truly understood. It was a complicated mix of emotions: anger, relief, sadness, and empowerment, all colliding in ways I couldn't have anticipated. I realized that exposing the betrayal wasn't just about the act itself, it was about refusing to be silenced. About reclaiming the dignity and respect that had been stripped away. By confronting him, I had shifted the balance of power. I no longer felt like a victim. I was a survivor, someone who had endured deception and emerged stronger. Someone who had learned that truth, when handled with courage and patience, could heal the deepest wounds. The confrontation didn't erase the pain, but it transformed it, turning heartbreak into a lesson in resilience and self-respect. After the confrontation, life felt both lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because the burden of secrecy and deception was finally lifted, heavier because the full impact of the betrayal settled in. I had to process the fact that someone I loved could act so recklessly and selfishly. Friends and family rallied around me, offering comfort, validation, and perspective I hadn't allowed myself to see while caught in the deception. Their support reminded me that I wasn't alone, that the world still held people who valued honesty and integrity. Meanwhile, he disappeared into a fog of excuses and shame, trying to rebuild a reputation that had already crumbled. Watching him face the consequences of his actions, seeing the ripple effect of his lies on people around him, was oddly sad. Out of malice, but because justice, in its own way, had been served. I found myself reflecting constantly, analyzing how I had ignored the signs and allowed someone else's dishonesty to dominate my life. The process was painful, but it was also empowering. I began reclaiming the parts of my life that had been overshadowed by betrayal: my confidence, my self-respect, and my independence. Slowly, the anger began to fade, replaced by clarity and determination. I understood that betrayal could hurt deeply, but it could also teach lessons no one else could. I learned to trust my instincts, to value myself above anyone else's opinions or manipulations, and to never compromise my integrity for someone who doesn't deserve it. Life didn't instantly return to normal, but I knew I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient than I had ever been before. Looking back, I see now that betrayal is a crucible, a painful test that exposes both weaknesses and strengths. The man I loved chose lies over honesty, manipulation over care, and selfishness over loyalty. And that choice revealed the reality of who he truly was. I had no control over his actions, but I did have control over how I responded. By documenting his lies, confronting him with courage, and reclaiming my life, I turned a devastating experience into a source of strength. The lessons I learned are simple but profound. Trust is invaluable. Deceit is never sustainable, and your self-worth cannot depend on someone else's honesty or loyalty. Betrayal might shake you to your core, but it can also be transformative, teaching resilience, patience, and the importance of boundaries. I learned that speaking the truth, even when it is hard, is a form of empowerment. And that exposing deception isn't cruelty, it's justice. Most importantly, I learned to honor myself, to value my feelings and instincts, and to never settle for less than I deserve. The experience left scars, yes, but it also left wisdom. I am stronger, wiser, and more attuned to the value of integrity and honesty than I ever was before. And while the past cannot be changed, the future is mine to shape with clarity, self-respect, and an unwavering commitment to never let betrayal define my life again.